In 1971, NASA launched Apollo 14.
40 seconds and counting. Alan Shepard reports that he's performing his final guidance alignment.
The first mission since the difficulties and challenges of Apollo 13. Astronauts Alan Shepard, Edgar Mitchell, and Stuart Roosa carry the weight of the American space program on their shoulders.
30 seconds and counting. Stu Roosa just said, thanks, it's been a good count.
I'm on the ground, but I know that my father's sitting on top of this massive rocket.
20 seconds, guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal.
Along with the hopes of the entire Apollo program, Apollo 14 carried something else among its payload.
Each astronaut was able to take something in something called the PPK, the Personal Preference Kit.
14, 13, 12, 11.
Some took alma maters from their school, some took jewelry. The Forest Service approached him, and so he wound up taking tree seeds.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
As a young girl, I could feel the excitement. The whole crowd almost willed that rocket up.
Liftoff. We have liftoff with Apollo 14. 3 minutes past the hour.
Apollo 14 was a resounding success, but for Command Module pilot Stuart Roosa, the mission's legacy was just beginning.
A moon tree is a tree grown from seeds that were taken on board the Apollo spacecraft to the moon in orbit and returned here to Earth, where they were sprouted and grown into trees. Those seedlings were then distributed across the country to schools and other public locations.
In collaboration with the USDA Forest Service, about 450 of the 500 seeds carried by Roosa were successfully germinated and planted around the United States between 1975 and 1976 as part of the nation's bicentennial celebrations, with many being publicly accessible today to inspire the next generation of scientists.
Moon trees are special because they kind of tell a story, an ongoing story of the bigger NASA mission.
I think one of the best things about space exploration is that it just excites kids about science.
I think trees are something that connect to our hearts in a way. And when you look at a tree and you think, that tree has been to the moon, it has explored and been further than most people get to go.
An event that happened 50 years ago is still generating huge excitement and is really opening doors to science.
Having something where people can connect to the story of what we're doing really brings kind of what we're doing to the public and makes them feel a part of it.
For me, as a tree lover, it's just so fascinating to think that these trees went up in space and they were exposed to all of these different conditions.
Back in those days, they really didn't know how deep space would affect the humans and how they would affect the tree seeds. So they didn't know if radiation or deep space, of the harshness of being around the moon, if they would even come back and grow. But they did grow. They grew normally. They didn't grow in some odd form or fashion. To me, the trees are an inspiration just to know that they've been out to space 240,000 miles and back. And it's just so neat that they're here on Earth and that you can feel them and you can touch them.
This is a first-generation Apollo moon tree, which means that it was grown from a seed that astronaut Stuart Roosa brought with him on the Apollo 14 mission. So I'm standing in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in front of the state capitol building, and this building is called the Roundhouse. You'll notice that it's circular, so it gives it the name. The other interesting thing about Santa Fe is that it's a very old city. It's a very rich city in history, and the moon tree is just part of the city's rich history. So there were 5 tree seeds distributed to New Mexico. This is one of the 5. It was planted here on the grounds of the state capitol building by New Mexico's First Lady, Clara Apodaca. As time went on over the decades, they lost track of where the tree was. The plaque that had been on the tree disappeared at some point. And in 2019, when a local news station decided to go find New Mexico's moon trees, they couldn't. They came here and they looked around and they couldn't identify which tree was the moon tree. They eventually contacted the former First Lady, Ms. Apodaca, and she was able to bring them to this tree and identify it as the moon tree since she planted it.
The Moon Tree Foundation was started back in 2011 for the 40th anniversary of Apollo 14. And the reason why we started the Moon Tree Foundation is I found out of the approximate 450 seeds that so many of them were dying off. And so at some point there's probably only around 70 or so original moon trees left from that mission. And so we thought we just can't let this beautiful living legacy from the Apollo program just fade away.
When we started talking to the NASA Office of STEM Engagement about the Artemis program and moon trees, we realized that we had a really special and unique opportunity to encourage people to go find those Apollo moon trees and find out what happened to them. How are they doing? How are they growing? And how is that growth compared to other trees of the same species? The NASA Moon Tree Quest is exactly that, a quest to find all of those first generation moon trees and to measure trees of the same species using the Globe Observer app. The Globe Observer app is the app of the Globe program. It was designed to allow citizen scientists or people of all ages to participate in the Globe program by collecting environmental data in support of NASA Earth science. So we have this function inside Globe Observer where we're able to ask people to go look for specific things in the environment. And so we said, well, why don't we ask them to look for moon trees? So we put the locations of 46 moon trees into the Globe Observer app. When you open your app, if you are near a moon tree, you'll get an alert that says, you are near a moon tree. Here's its location, and here's how you can find that tree. Please go use the tree tool inside the Globe Observer app to measure that tree. We also are asking people to look for trees of the same species. So this is a Douglas fir tree. I'm standing in the Douglas fir region. I can go find other Douglas fir trees throughout the western United States to measure other trees and kind of get a sense of how this tree is doing compared to others. So people participating in the GLOBE program take environmental measurements that are complementary to the same types of things that NASA observes from space.
The GLOBE program, or Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment, is an international science and education program that brings together scientists, students, teachers, and now citizen scientists together to take environmental measurements, the data from which are then entered into our global database.
Every year, the GLOBE program hosts its annual meeting, a gathering of science educators and students from over 120 different countries to celebrate their achievements, share their research, and look to the future.
At the annual meeting, we have the opportunity to bring together some of those students who've done exceptional research. Members of the GLOBE community will attend. They'll have a student experience.
In association with Rosemary Roosa and the Moon Tree Foundation, the GLOBE program dedicated an Apollo Moon Tree descendant at its 2023 annual meeting as part of the student experience.
As an ode to his days as a smoke jumper with the Forest Service, my father wound up taking tree seeds. The seeds chosen wound up representing different regions of the United States: the loblolly pine, the redwood, Douglas fir, sweet gum, and the American sycamore. And I do want to point out that we just happen to have an American sycamore moon tree here today, which is a descendant of an original seed that my father took on Apollo 14.
The original moon tree seeds went up and circumnavigated the moon in 1971. We're now going to be planting a descendant of one of those original moon tree seeds here.
NCAR-UCAR are a world-class science and research organization. Here at the NCAR Mesa Lab, we have interactive exhibits that showcase the science that happens here at the NCAR facilities. This includes weather, climate, space weather, and we even have a weather trail outside. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people come to visit the NCAR Mesa Lab, and I'm thrilled to say that we have the Apollo 14 moon tree descendant that will be here at the facility.
When we're looking for a spot for the moon tree, we are looking for somewhere that has a lot of good sunlight so the tree can photosynthesize and feed itself. When we're talking about a site like the Mesa Lab that's really exposed, we're up in the foothills, we get a lot of wind, we get a lot of snow. So we're looking for maybe a little bit of wind protection. So we talked a little bit about finding a windbreak or, somewhere where a building or other trees are kind of blocking the wind for this tree as it gets going. We're also looking at things like rodent control or, other critters that want to chew on the trees.
A sheltered site was selected next to the Fleischmann building on the north side of the NCAR campus. And in July of 2023, the moon tree descendant was dedicated by Stuart Roosa in front of an audience of Globe's next generation of scientists.
So it's so great being here at the Globe annual meeting, seeing all the children from all over the world. My father believed in passing the baton to the next generation. He always felt like it was his duty to teach us kids so that we could help our kids and just to grow. And so I think he would be very proud that NASA has chosen to take more tree seeds on the Artemis mission.
The Artemis program will build upon what we did in the Apollo program and revisit the moon, establish a long-term presence there, and use that as a stepping stone to go further into space than we've ever gone before. For me, the moon trees are extremely important because they help connect the Apollo program with what we're going to be doing on the Artemis program, taking our legacy and building upon it and taking it further.
Artemis is prioritizing diversity, and we're seeing that every step of the way.
On the Artemis program, one of the goals is to send the first woman and the first person of color to the surface of the moon.
And we're really proud that we're going to be a part of that and make that happen.
On November 16, 2022, NASA launched Artemis 1, an uncrewed orbital flyby of the moon. The mission tested the Space Launch System rocket for the first time and pushed the Orion crew and service modules to its limits before astronauts fly inside it. Alongside its crew of sensor-laden mannequins and other payloads, Artemis 1 once again carried tree seeds around the moon in a continuation of the original Apollo 14 moon tree experiment.
I think moon trees can inspire the Artemis generation in a few ways. One, because it allows people to see that it's not just rocket scientists and engineers. We see this collaboration between two government agencies. We're talking about the Forest Service as well as NASA coming together to kind of bring that story together. Another thing that I think is inspiring is the citizen science aspect. So the fact that you can actually get a piece of something that traveled to the lunar vicinity and bring it home and share it with your community is really important and inspiring.
For Artemis 1, we actually sent 2 batches of moon tree seeds. The first batch was installed inside the official flight kit, which was mounted in the cargo bay that was directly underneath Commander Munikin Campos's crew seat. However, due to some of the delays we experienced and the rollback to the VAB due to Hurricane Ian, it was decided that the moon tree seeds might not be viable when they came back to Earth. So a team quickly readied themselves. They harvested more moon tree seeds, delivered them to KSC. At that point, we needed like an easily accessible location to install them because the internal of the crew module was very much buttoned up and we were anxious to get back out to the pad for another launch attempt. It was decided that Commander Munikin Campos would keep those second batch of moon tree seeds in his flight suit pocket, and that's where they flew for the mission.
What happened is somehow NASA was talking to the Forest Service, and they both agreed that this was a cool idea to grow moon trees.
We always like to expand our minds a little bit, and when we had the opportunity to take on some of the moon trees and grow them, we said, oh yeah, we'd love to do it. I mean, it's very interesting when you think where these seeds have been. It's not what we normally do every day.
As a scientist, you don't get a lot of opportunities to work with seeds that have been in space. So a great opportunity for me as a scientist to just be geeky and do some science around it. It's also just a great opportunity to start doing outreach, including STEM education, promoting science, promoting exploration, promoting citizen science, promoting how we view the world in this little very special place we call Earth.
With the hope of offering moon trees to a broader audience across the United States, the USDA Forest Service selected slightly different tree species for the Artemis 1 mission than were originally taken on Apollo 14.
I'd like to introduce you to the Artemis moon trees. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what we have here just so that you can you know who the characters are. So these are sweet gum. Sweet gum was part of the Apollo 14 moon trees mission as well. Sweet gum, this is from the southeastern United States. Next up, giant sequoia. Giant sequoia was not part of the Apollo 14 mission, but its cousin, coast redwood, was. Both coast redwood and giant sequoia grow really large. We decided to go with giant sequoia rather than coast redwood just because we think we have the potential to plant sequoia in many more locations than coast redwood. Next up, Douglas fir. Douglas fir is a really common species in the western United States. It was part of the Apollo 14 mission as well. We did a little bit of a different twist this time around in that we again selected Douglas fir, but we picked 3 different sources of seeds. Again, trying to be more specialized so that when these trees are adopted by organizations and get planted, they'll be more in tune to the environment that they've been planted in and the environment that they've come from. And we also have loblolly pine. Again, this was part of Apollo 14 mission 2. It's a very fast-growing conifer. As you can see, these are just a couple of months old and they're very vigorous and very fast-growing. And then finally we have American sycamore. Sycamore is a really fast-growing hardwood species. These seedlings are all the same age, but you'll see that there's a lot of difference in their sizes so far. And it's just because species are different. So those are the 5 species. As you can see, they're growing. They're not quite ready to go out to the real world yet, but with some more tender loving care by our nursery managers, these will eventually be adopted and planted out and then examined over time.
And now my main goal is to, if possible, get them to set a bud and stop growing so that they're dormant, because dormant trees are a lot more resilient to being shipped around the country.
The important thing about participating in moon trees is that we're going to engage students and adults in this science endeavor.
It's all about community engagement, getting people excited about science, excited about space exploration, excited about life sciences and growing trees.
So the Apollo trips to the moon, the Apollo science, inspired a whole generation of students to become scientists and to be interested in sciences. And Artemis hopes to do the same thing with this Artemis generation.
Artemis is really taking us beyond the limits that we have traveled already. I mean, they are talking about going to Mars, and who knows, some of these kids that get to plant these trees, maybe we have some future astronauts that want to get involved in this program, and maybe this will push them towards that direction.
I think he would be very proud that we're going to the moon again, and I think he would be very honored that y'all are taking tree seeds again.
These seedlings are going to be distributed again across the United States to schools specifically, so students and schools can apply to grow the next generation of moon trees.
There's so many opportunities to get involved no matter what kind of background you have. So if you're great at math, you know, there's that angle, but if you're not great at math, there's other angles. It's for anybody who wants to be a part of the overall NASA mission.
Their hope is that they will gain another interest in science that is not just looking at space, but also grounded here on Earth, and inspire that whole next generation of scientists.
As somebody that grew up as a little girl totally enthralled with the footage of our astronauts walking on the surface of the moon and watching all those movies and just really feeling inspired about what they did and wondering what it would be like to live during that time, we're here. We are coming to that point where we're going to experience it again. And I'm beyond excited to live through that, experience that, and all the hope and adventure that we're about to embark on.
I would tell the next generation, if you have a dream, if you have a goal, just don't let anyone deter you. Don't let anybody just put you down. My father used to have a saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So just keep going, keep following your passion, keep following your dream, and you never know what doors are going to open. And you might just go back to the moon.
As we move into an exciting new era of science and space exploration with Artemis, our past Apollo successes study each step into the unexplored. For the Artemis generation, moon trees past, present, and future inspire us to go further than ever before while also honoring our home planet Earth.